Well, we're into September, the 1st of September today, and I've returned to the former hospital here at Ransom Wood, just outside of Mansfield. A very picturesque place it is too. I do quite enjoy coming here. It's a lovely mild night, high pressure now over us, and a layer of cumulostratus cloud is predominating. I think that might develop a few chinks in it, but it shouldn't allow the temperature to drop that much. I think the minimum is forecast to be about 13 centigrade, and that's by dawn. But I'm going to give it a few hours here and see what turns up. I'm quite looking forward to this, very much the unknown quantity. Well, the generator's just at the front of the car, as you may well be able to see it. And it's very strange trapping in a large car park, but it's not your ordinary car park. It's surrounded by some really nice habitat of both deciduous and coniferous and evergreen trees. Always the potential for a wide variety of moths here. But this is only the second time I've trapped here. I do have a list of the species that has occurred here, but I haven't looked at it. So anything that comes will pretty much be a surprise in terms of rarities. But it's just a nice place, just a few miles away, just to pop out and run the trap for a couple of hours. I'll be giving it 2 hours, and depending on what I catch in those 2 hours will depend and decide whether I stay longer, and I probably will, to be honest. Nice to be back here again. Now here's one of those typical moths that make trapping in autumn worthwhile, because there's a number of species that are yellow or golden yellow and orange and pink. This is a sallow, and this is one of those moths, and this is probably the commonest of the lots of species that will occur in gardens. I don't get lots of them in my own garden, but if you trap anywhere rural, you're going to get a lot of these. It's an absolute beauty though, just look at that. Another advert for people, for changing people's minds and helping to change people's minds, that moths aren't all just brown with teeth. This is an absolute stunner of a moth. Extremely fresh and flies in sort of September and October. This may have hatched this very day. It's an absolute beauty though. This is a sallow. There's another yellowish but very common moth, another moth of all habitat types, from rural areas to urban gardens, and this is a yellow shell, beautifully marked, absolutely crackingly marked, but extremely variable. You get moths at the extreme of this, either with very few markings or with quite dark and pronounced markings. And say when one of those flutters in, it makes you think that you've got something unusual. But it's a lovely moth nonetheless, and common and widespread. So that's a yellow shell that's come in. Oh, progressing quite nicely. The maiden's blush just come in. So that takes us on to about 18 species by my reckoning. Not too bad at all. There's been more small square spots than square spot rustic, which I'm sure will change. In fact, it was the small square spots that started to come in first before square spot rustic. It can all get a bit confusing, you know, but The sallow was a nice moth. Still fairly quiet in terms of numbers of moths around, and it was like that when I trapped here. I think it was July when I came and trapped here. Missed August. I ran out of August, but it will pick up. I'm sure it's going to pick up as something else comes in. Large carpet type. It's probably going to be grey pine carpet or pine carpet. I'll wait till it settles down, but a very pleasant night so far nonetheless. Well, it's not very often one of these sits still long enough to enable me to film it. So this is a pristine common marble carpet. Very easy to identify moth, nothing else with this pattern. Although common marble carpet is an extremely variable moth, but the majority of specimens will be like this, with this large patch of a tawny sort of fulvous brown. Unmistakable and common in all types of habitat, but especially urban areas. I get a lot of these late in the year in the garden, so it's one that you will catch within your first year's moth trapping. A couple of broods a year, but a really attractive and quite large carpet species. So this is common marble carpet. Well, it's quite steady, but fast approaching 32 species. And there's a couple of nice moths that I normally wouldn't trap. One is a tawny speckled pug, and if it decides to settle down in the pot, I'll get a chance to video it and film it for you. Otherwise, you'll have to put up with a photograph. The other moth, which is in a similar situation, it's in another tub, is a white-lined dart, and that's a species that Didis and I only trapped a handful of times really. We have had it at home. It can turn up pretty much anywhere, and that's a nice moth. As I say, I've not trapped many white-lined darts before, so that's a good one to get. Otherwise, it's just very pleasant. Steady number of moths. I'm sure the number of moths is going to increase, but it's tawny speckled pug and white-lined dart that are the two best moths so far. Ransom Wood's a beautiful setting. It's a nice place to visit. It does sound quite rowdy at times, but there is a suite where weddings and receptions can be held. There's a restaurant there that you can visit during the day, the Forever Green restaurant, and it's a lovely place to come and pass an hour and then have a walk around the old grounds here, the old hospital grounds. It's a lovely setting, and that's a fabulous building, been really nicely done up and maintained. The whole area is all office blocks set in a wooded habitat, and the owner is very, very keen on wildlife and biodiversity. Well, the moths are just starting to drop in now. I don't know what kind of time we're on, but there's one or two large yellow underwings started to come in. But best moth of the night so far is in here, and it's a migrant, and it's a rusty dot pearl. It's quite took me by surprise. It's absolutely immaculate, which means it could have hatched 10 yards over there, or it could have hatched in somewhere in the continent, in France or something, yesterday, or even earlier today, and has come across. So that's nice. It's not playing at the moment. Some moths don't like to sit on a flat surface. They prefer a vertical surface, so you'll probably be looking at a photograph, but I'm taking this one home because it is absolutely immaculate. And this is a migrant moth that I've not trapped that regular, just odd occurrences in odd years, to be honest. So I'm pleased with that. That's nice. We're doing quite well for micros as well. It's time to have a wander around the light, I think. It's funny how all of a sudden it goes from being quiet to moths coming in. actually started to get quite busy. Just a glimpse of the moon. The clouds thinned, but it's not clear. Temperature's still 15 centigrade. Looks quite atmospheric with the moon just poking through the cloud. Oh, well past the 2-hour mark, and it's very quiet. There just doesn't seem to be the moths around. And I've had a look under the street lights or the car park lights here. There's just a few sort of midges flying around them, and there's no moths. Years ago there would have been, I'm sure. I don't know whether moths around street lights has become something of the past. I know when we used to have the orange sodium street lights, you would get moths flying around quite regular, I remember, in my childhood. But now it seems that there just aren't the moths there, and that's certainly what people have been saying. And there's been relatively few species. We could possibly make 40 species if I continue at it, but the variety of micro moths, for instance, there's just not the micro moths there. To be honest, tonight the macro moths aren't here. The variances of moth trapping from year to year, but there seems to be very little flying. Temperature is 15 centigrade, so plenty warm enough temperature wise. So we'll see what comes in. Well, I've just been bemoaning the lack of moths coming in and hoping that a change in the weather conditions might indeed bring a few species in, and it so far appears to. It's certainly dropped this in. This is an angle-striped sallow, not a common moth in Nottinghamshire. One of those moths that I would describe as something of a Sherwood Forest speciality. I can't remember taking this at home, but I may well have done, and it has been recorded from a number of other sites, occasionally in Nottinghamshire. But if this turns up in your garden trap, you should be well pleased, because it's not that common a moth. It's another one of those beautiful coloured autumn noctuids that we have, and what we're going to get over the next few weeks. So this is angle striped sallow, which is just dropped in. Now here's a moth that I rarely catch, and this is the third one that's here tonight, and this is a tawny speckled pug, one of our most attractive pugs, and more importantly for many people, one of our most easiest to identify because of those large tawny areas in the middle and covering most of the forewings, to be honest. This is a nicely marked one. One was incredibly worn, and you could only just detect the tawny areas on the wing. So this is a really good record, and I'm pleased to have 3 tonight so far. In fact, I've almost certainly doubled my lifetime's total of this attractive pug. But it's a nice one. It will turn up pretty much anywhere, so one to look out for, even in suburban. I have had this at home, might have had it on a couple of occasions, but it's not a common moth for me. So that's tawny speckled pug. That's a nice one, good record. Well, it's midnight and there's no real indications that anything sparkling is going to come in, but it's been a pleasant enough almost 3 hours. But it's just generally very quiet. I don't think it's anything to do with the site. I've had some good moths. Just seems very, very quiet. And there is without a doubt, a lack of moths generally. But I've enjoyed this session. It's always nice coming to Ransom, even in the daytime. The few times that I have visited, I always enjoy coming here. So we'll be here again at some time. Hopefully we may catch more of those beautiful autumn noctuids that are going to be so prevalent over the next few weeks.